Thanks for tapping in with Street TV. I'm Alex Alonso, and I'm here with another Eric Holder trial update. And by looking through the archives, I realized I didn't do an update for day 2 of testimony in the People vs. Eric Holder. And I want to give that to you real quick. Right now, the jury is deliberating, and they most likely won't have a verdict until next week. They continue to deliberate on Tuesday, but let me give you the whole rundown on day 2. And Cowboy, Herman Douglas, he was the first witness to testify. He lasted from day 1 into day 2. So I'm not going to give you any rundown on Cowboy because I did a whole nother video just on Cowboy. So after Cowboy got off the stand, the second witness that the prosecution put up was a young brother named Christian Johnson, and he was in the Master Burger at the same time that Eric Holder came in there and ordered his food or picked up his food. And he was also still in there waiting for his food when Eric Holder came back and shot Nipsey Hussle, Kerry Latham, and Herman Villanueva. So let me give you a little bit of what happened on his testimony on day 2. He's 31 years old. He's from Inglewood. He was asked, "Do you live by Crenshaw and Slauson?" He said, "No. I went there for the first time on that day." And there's an image that they showed of Christian Johnson standing inside the Master Burger. At the time, he said he was homeless, and he went to Master Burger to order some food. He was asked, "How long were you in there before you started to hear the shooting?" And he said that he was in there for 5 to 10 minutes. He heard one shot, and then he heard multiple shots. "Before the shooting, was there anything unusual to you?" He said, "No." "Did you see people out there?" "Yes." "Did you know who Nipsey Hussle was?" "Yes." "Was you a fan of Nipsey Hussle?" "Yes." "What did you see?" Christian said he was talking to people, and then Prosecutor John McKinney asked him, "Did you get close to him, like physically close to him?" He said, "No." "What did you know about that neighborhood?" He said, "I didn't know anything. I just went to the Master Burger because they accept EBT and they're known for their chili cheese fries." And then there was a little laughter in the court after he made that statement. And then he said he stayed inside the Master Burger the entire time when he heard the shots and then multiple shots. He saw people running and he decided to duck under the red shelf. They have, I guess it's really a red table where you could eat your food at while you're standing. And if you look at the Shell gas station camera, angle 6 of the whole parking lot, and then you look to the left where the Master Burger is, you'll see Christian Johnson ducking down because the whole Master Burger facade is glass, so you can see inside the whole Master Burger. And then he said, "Could you see the shooting?" He said, "No, I ducked my head." And then he said after he went outside to move his car, and then he said he saw Nipsey Hussle down. And then at that point he got really emotional and he started crying, like an outburst of tears. Prosecutor asked, "Are you okay?" And then he just nodded his head no. At that point it was about 11:02 a.m. The judge takes a break and the judge tells the jury, "Well, we're taking a break." So the jury walks out. The judge asked him to step down and go get some water. And we took a break for about 15 minutes. And then around 11:17, question continued. He was at the Master Burger at the same time as Eric Holder. He says he doesn't recall talking to Eric Holder, and he was asked about the guy with no shirt on. While he was in the store, Eric walks by in a red shirt, and they played a video clip. So this is when he walks by to come back and shoot. So Christian Johnson is still standing inside the Master Burger waiting for his food. And then the Master Burger camera footage captures Eric Holder returning to where Nipsey is standing at, this time with the red shirt. And they played the video clip of that. From the inside of Master Burger, Christian was looking at Nipsey and he got very emotional again. And then at that point, Prosecutor John McKinney said he had no further questions, and the defense had no questions for him. He was done by 11:27 a.m. on day 2. Then right after Right after Christian Johnson, the next witness was a LAPD officer named Scott Teuber, Teuber. Witness number 3 for the prosecution, police officer for 22 years, South Bureau Homicide. In 2019, he was working intel, and his job was to gather video evidence. He was called to retrieve video. So he canvassed the area for video surveillance, and he locates the cameras at the Shell gas station. Exhibit number 11 is a photograph, an aerial photograph of the Shell gas station, and it shows the 3 camera locations and the angles that those 3 cameras point at. Those cameras are angle 6, 5, and 21. He stated he is not the officer that retrieved the Master Burger footage that we had just saw when Christian Johnson testified. He found the 3 cameras at the Shell gas station, and he noted that there was a 67-minute discrepancy on all 3 cameras. So that would put it, at the time of the shooting, it's going to say 14:11 time-stamped on the Shell gas station cameras, 14:11, 2:11. Just add 67 minutes, and that's the time that the shooting starts. And let me also add that the Master Burger camera footage actually has the correct time on it. So when that evidence comes out, when it becomes public, you can see it. In fact, if you check out the closing arguments that I posted up on the StreetTV channel, there's a couple of close-ups of the Shell, not the Shell, but the Master Burger. There's a couple close-ups of the Master Burger video footage, and you can see the timestamps on there. They are pretty accurate. I think it says definitely says 3 p.m., 3-something p.m. on those. So while Scott Teuber from the LAPD was testifying, we learned number 6 angle of the Shell gas tank footage is the main footage that shows the parking lot where everything goes down at. That's number 6. And there's another exhibit, number 12. It's a photo of camera 21 and a photo of camera 14 angle. And he testified that after he canvassed the community and identified those Shell gas stations, he talked about the process of getting the footage. And then the next job that he said he did was he delivered that footage to the detectives. And then that was the end of direct examination. Aaron Jansen asked him about one simple question. He only asked him about seeing a warrant. Did you see a warrant? And Officer Teuber said no, and that was the end of witness Teuber. And then the next witness number 4, was a young lady named Danae Wright. I believe her name is spelled D-A-N-A-E, Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T. She's witness number 4 on day 2. And she's the one that is sitting in the dark vehicle that is parked in the parking lot, pointing west along the parked cars to the south side of the parking lot, that when the shooting starts, she runs out. She runs out twice. So they tracked her down and brought her in as a witness. She said she was at Crenshaw and Slauson. She didn't know what time she got there. It was the afternoon. She said we were gonna go see Nip. We had heard he was in the parking lot, or we had heard he was there. I was sitting in the car with my kids. Kids, I believe it was 2, although that wasn't asked. Could have been more. But definitely kids, plural, were asleep in the car. Then I heard shots, she said. Was in the parking lot just for minutes before the shooting. The way she got there, she said she drove in through the alley from the south to the north. And then they played some of the Shell gas station footage of camera angle number 6. And it showed her parked in the parking lot. She was not in a space right there in the middle of the lot. And she was asked by McKinney, "Are you from the area?" She said, "No, but I've been there before." Oh, she did have 2 kids. She said, "I had my 2 kids with me." The ages of those 2 kids were not asked, but I was just curious how old her kids were, being that they were sleeping in the car. Sometimes when we say kids, like I have kids that are teenagers with their kids. They're still kids to me, but I get the sense that her kids were much younger because she said they were asleep in the car. But hey, I've had my teenage sons sleeping in the backseat of the car while I'm driving too. So we have no idea how old her kids were. But she said they were asleep in the car. And she said, "Did you know him?" Meaning Nipsey. She said yes. And then she mentioned that one of her windows was bust out, but I don't believe from this shooting. She was watching from sitting in her car. She said Nip was taking photos with some friends. Then the shooting occurs while she is parked there. She said, "I hear the shooting, but I didn't see the shooting." "How many shots?" She said, "A couple." Then McKinney asked her, "Do you know the defendant?" She said no. Then they played the video footage of her running out the car, running back in. She was trying to wake up her kids. And then she actually stayed in the area after the shooting. And at some point, Detective Washington called her based on seeing her car and a lot of the video footage there. And that's pretty much the end of Danae Washington. Danae Wright. She didn't really have a whole lot to add to the case. And Prosecutor John McKinney told the jury during closing statements that some of the witnesses that were brought to this case aren't necessarily witnesses to the incident. He just wanted to draw out a picture of what happened, who was there, and who saw what. And I guess she would be one of those witnesses that she was definitely affected by the shooting, but she didn't have any information about the shooting. And defense attorney Jansen had no questions for her. And then after her, we have Kerry Latham. Cousin Kerry testified. He pretty much testified to nothing on that day, but he testified in the afternoon. So after lunch, when we were on the 9th floor, I noticed he was sitting there in his wheelchair, and he was in a different type of wheelchair. It looked like it had a little bit of a recline on the wheelchair to where he can lay back a bit. It wasn't the typical or traditional type of wheelchair, but he was there with a person that was, I guess I would call this woman his caregiver. She was wheeling him around, and they put him into the courtroom, and they positioned him right next to the witness box, and he started to answer McKinney's questions. He asked him about his age. He said he was 59. "Were you born in Los Angeles?" He said, "No, I was born in Texas, but I came to LA as a young child and been here ever. And have you been here ever since?" He said, "Yeah." But then McKinney said, "Yeah, you've been here ever since, but from 1996 to 2018, you was away from LA, convicted of murder and released in September 2018. And then he asked him about, when did you first learn about Nipsey Hussle? You heard of Nipsey Hussle in prison? And actually, Kerry said something interesting. He said he met Nipsey Hussle in 1994 at the swap meet when he was just he called him a young hustler. And he said he sold me oil. So in 1994, Nipsey Hussle would have been 9 years old. So that was interesting because in a previous interview that Kerry Latham said, he said that he did not know Nipsey Hussle until he came home, so or even heard of him. But he maybe didn't remember that at the time. Or what could have happened is when Kerry Latham was released from prison and him and Nipsey got to talking, maybe that meeting back in 1994 refreshed everyone's memory. But I thought that was interesting. He said that Nipsey was a young hustler back in 1994. And then he said, "Did you get to meet him again?" And he said, "Yes. After getting clothes, yes, about 1 week later." Before that, he said, he sent me clothes. He sent me sweats, T-shirts, underwear, clothes. And he said he met Nipsey 1 week after that. Before the shooting, did you meet Nipsey Hussle? He said, "Yes, don't remember when, but I thanked him for the clothing." So some of the answers that Kerry Latham begins to deliver, some of them are a bit confusing. And let me also add, there are long pauses between the end of Prosecutor John McKinney's question and Kerry Latham's answer. sometimes we're sitting there, we're literally waiting for like 15 seconds for him to start answering. And there was a couple questions he just didn't answer at all. There was nothing from Kerry Latham. So it's really hard for me to deliver the tone and manner of Kerry Latham's testimony, because it was quite unusual, and at times he was answering questions that weren't asked. So McKinney said, so the nephew drove you to the Marathon store. What happened when your nephew pulled the car in? At that point, there was a long pause from Kerry Latham, and then he didn't answer. And then he said, I walked over to Nip, shook his hand, never made it to the store. Asked how long was he there before the shooting? About 10 to 15 minutes. He said, I was standing in front of him, very close between parked cars. And then they showed a couple of photos that shows 2 white cars where Nipsey and Kerry Latham were having their conversation. And then he was asked to look at this photo where it was the exact spot where they were standing at. This would have been exhibit number 16. And he said, I don't recognize anyone in the photo. I don't know if that's cars, or if those were the cars we were standing by. And then they showed him the Escalade that Shermae Villanueva pulled up in with Kerry in the car. And he says, I'm not sure if I came in that black truck. And then he said, I took 2 steps after getting shot. That wasn't even the question. He just said that. He doesn't, and there's a picture of him on the ground after he got shot. He says he doesn't see himself on the ground when looking at the photo with him on the ground. So at that point, I could tell this guy was deliberately not answering questions. Before that point, I just felt that the condition that he was in, the physical condition that he was in, was probably the reason why he's having a tough time answering questions. I thought that he was suffering physically and that it was taking him time to answer. But then I started to realize, nah, this brother just doesn't want to answer any questions. So then there's a sidebar at 2:18. I believe the judge called this sidebar, which is unusual. Most of the sidebars are after the objection of one of the attorneys. So at 2:18, the judge and the 2 attorneys are hobnobbing about basically, hey man, this witness is not answering any questions. He's taking a long time to answer questions, and he just doesn't seem like he wants to be here. I thought they were going to excuse him. I was talking to some of the media we was with, and I was like, okay, I think the judge is going to let Kerry go out of sympathy for his condition. But no, they all came back and direct examination resumed. I put here, Kerry is not responding much to questions. There are long pauses before he answers McKinney's questions, and the judge asked the jury to step out. So they had this sidebar outside the presence of the jury, but not where the audience and the media could hear. Because usually the sidebars are done to not let the jury hear what the conversation is. But when the jury's not in court, they're not in the courtroom, there's really most times no need for a sidebar. But this judge wanted a sidebar because I guess he didn't want us to hear what they were talking about. So then they continued direct examination. John McKinney asked him, did you go to the hospital after you were shot but did not have surgery? His answer was, I'm in the hospital now. So that answer didn't really address that question. He says, are you able to walk? He said, with a walker. And at this point, we learned that he had a right side brain stroke after the shooting. Not immediately after shooting. We don't have a date. Actually, I don't recall if there was a date, a year when he had this stroke. But then there was some grand jury transcripts that McKinney decided to read, and he asked him, whose car is the Escalade? What do you think Kerry Latham's answer was to that one? It doesn't get any easier than asking who drove you in that beautiful black Escalade to the Marathon store parking lot. His answer was, I don't know. Then while showing the video, he was asked, is that you getting out of that Escalade? Is that you jumping out right there, walking over to Nipsey? He says, I don't remember. And then, is this the area where you saw Nipsey Hussle? And they were pointing to where the cars were parked. He says, I think so. And then this is when he said, look, I don't know nothing. I didn't see nothing. There wasn't even a question being asked. He just came out with that. And then he was asked, did you get out the car and go to the group? He said, no. Then they played the video and they showed him getting out the car, going to the group. And then he says, I'm not sure if I was in that group. Then there was a long pause at this point, like maybe 20 seconds. I know 20 seconds doesn't sound long, but when you're answering questions and the courtroom is quiet, everyone's quiet, and we're just listening to this one guy talk, 20 seconds is a long time for not answering the question. And then he responds, I can't get my thoughts together. And then he was asked, was he a friendly person, Nipsey Hussle? Without hesitation, his answer was, he's a very friendly person. So there was no pause, there was no hesitation. It was a friendly question. He got a friendly answer. Yes, Nipsey Hussle was a very friendly person. And then there was an objection by the defense because the defense said that's leading, that's very leading, because the type of question you want to ask is what type of person was Nipsey Hussle, rather than saying, was Nipsey Hussle a friendly person? That part was leading. And then I took a glance at what was going on in the courtroom. I noticed there were 4 deputies in court at this time. There were 2 sitting by Eric Holder. There were 2 by the door. And then the questioning continued. Were you standing close to the shop? And he didn't have an answer. How many shots did you hear? McKinney asked Kerry Latham. His answer was, a lot. Did you see who did the shooting? There was a quick no. Could you see the shooter? Could you see if the shooter was a man or a woman? And his answer was, this was the best answer he gave in this entire testimony. He said, if I just told you I didn't see him, how could I tell you if he was a man or a woman? And then at that point, that answer confirmed to me that Kerry Latham is putting on an act. Even though he's in a wheelchair, even though he suffered a stroke, these long pauses to answering the questions, in the beginning I was feeling sympathetic to his physical condition, but then I just realized he just doesn't want to answer questions. He said he turned from the shots, he took 1 or 2 steps and fell. And then McKinney wants to read some grand jury transcripts. He wants to read page 120, lines 8 through 28. Then there's a sidebar. And it was a short sidebar for about 3 minutes. At this point, it's almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Kerry says, he just says, I don't remember. You're trying to make me remember something I don't want to remember. And then he says, I don't want to be here. And then at that point, I think that was pretty much the end of the testimony. The defense wanted to ask some more questions, but that was it. And I believe that was the end of Kerry Latham's testimony. And that was also the end of day 2. And that's it for the witnesses of day 2, minus Cowboy, which you can go see on the other video. Thanks for tapping in with StreetTV. Thanks for tapping in with this Eric Holder trial update. And please subscribe.